Everyone knows the story of the Titanic, though most of us are familiar with it thanks to the iconic 1997 film. That's how I first learned about it too, and the movie captivated me. I was only a 7-year-old child then, but the story of the Titanic affected me so deeply that my father took me to a late-night showing of the movie on its opening day. I remember the theater was packed with only one seat left, and I watched the entire 3.5-hour movie, including the commercials, next to my dad. I was shocked by the idea that a ship claimed to be unsinkable sank on its maiden voyage, becoming the watery grave for 1,523 people. I was so impacted that I even kept a notebook where I collected articles and pictures of the Titanic from newspapers and magazines. Setting aside all its dramatized elements, Titanic with DiCaprio and Winslet was a fantastic film, and I have nothing but praise for it. But when I think about it now, there's something we often overlook. Titanic wasn't just a love story between Jack and Rose. Of course, you could find or write about tales of love, passion, desire, anger, every possible emotion, among the thousands of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds on that ship. But the Titanic is not just a love story. It's a tale of managerial failures, a natural disaster, and an engineering catastrophe. When we look past the love story of a poor boy and a rich girl and begin to question scientifically how such a marvel of engineering from that era could sink so easily, we uncover a fascinating scientific story based on findings from the past 110 years. I think it's time to tell the true story of the Titanic. This is the scientific story of the Titanic. The Titanic was not only the largest passenger ship produced at that time, but it was also the largest ship ever built in any class. Its length of 269 meters, weight of 46,328 gross tons, and passenger capacity of 3,547 made it the largest ship of its era. There was also its lesser-known twin, the Olympic, which didn't sink and even gave its name to that class of ships. In addition to the Olympic and Titanic, there was also the Britannic, which was used as a hospital ship during World War I and sank in the Aegean Sea after hitting a German mine. Interestingly, the Britannic holds the title of the largest ship sunk during World War I, but thanks to warmer waters, more lifeboats, and quick aid, 1,036 of its 1,066 passengers were saved. However, unlike the Titanic, the Olympic didn't share a tragic fate, which is why it was never as popular. But today, our topic is not the Britannic or the Olympic, but rather the Titanic. From the day it was built, the Titanic's fate was sealed. The iceberg that would deal a fatal blow to the ship was born nearly simultaneously with the Titanic, 3,200 kilometers away in western Greenland. The snow that accumulated over this massive 75 million-ton iceberg dated back to around 100,000 years ago. Although the iceberg might seem extraordinary, it was actually quite ordinary in comparison to the approximately 40,000 icebergs that form each year. However, due to unique conditions, this iceberg embarked on an unusual journey southwards. Icebergs don't normally head directly south to busier shipping lanes after formation. Rather, they first move north along Greenland's Baffin Bay, then turn west, and finally head south toward the Atlantic Ocean. Most icebergs get stuck in the shallow waters along the Gulf, so few reach the Atlantic. But in the year of the Titanic's maiden voyage, an exceptional event took place that allowed this iceberg to travel farther south, setting the stage for the Titanic's disaster. 3 critical mistakes in Titanic's construction contributed to its eventual sinking. The first mistake occurred 2 years before the ship's construction when the chief designer, Alexander Carlisle, and the ship's investor, Bruce Ismay, met. Ismay wanted the main staircase where Kate Winslet descends in the film to be as magnificent as possible. As a result, the structural integrity of the ship was pushed to its limits, and the walls dividing the ship's different decks were lowered to allow more space for the staircase. For a ship to avoid sinking or to make it more difficult to sink, these compartment walls should be high above the waterline. But due to these aesthetic choices, the compartments were only built 3 meters above the waterline, causing the ship to take on water much faster than it should have. The second design flaw involved the deck layout. The Titanic had the capacity to carry 64 lifeboats, each capable of carrying about 65 to 70 people, albeit uncomfortably, which could save up to 4,500 people in an emergency. This far exceeded the Titanic's passenger capacity of 3,547. However, Ismay, after reviewing the models with Carlisle, felt that having so many lifeboats cluttered the deck, ruining the ship's aesthetic, and requested that the number of lifeboats be reduced to 16. Consequently, the ship's lifeboat capacity was cut to 1,178, enough for only 53% of the 2,223 people aboard. The third mistake occurred during the construction phase. At that time, steel was just beginning to be used in shipbuilding, whereas ships were previously constructed from iron. Although steel was stronger than iron, it was more challenging to work with. Rivets were used to connect the steel plates, but since steel rivet machines were still new, steel rivets could only be used on some parts of the Titanic. In the bow area, iron rivets had to be used, which were weaker and could only withstand up to 5 millimeters of shear pressure, causing the hull to split like a zipper upon impact with an iceberg. In the month before Titanic's departure, the ship's operator, White Star Line, appointed their most experienced captain, John Smith, to captain the ship. Smith was so popular among wealthy travelers that he was nicknamed the Captain of the Millionaires. Ironically, Smith planned to retire after Titanic's voyage. The communication team aboard the Titanic, overwhelmed with passenger messages, received 6 iceberg warnings from various ships, but didn't prioritize them. One warning from the SF Californian, which was surrounded by icebergs and had stopped for the night, was disregarded by Titanic's communication officer Jack Phillips, who brusquely responded, shut up, I'm busy," leading the Californian to cut off contact. This mistake would prove deadly, as the Californian was the closest ship to Titanic during the disaster. Additionally, the lack of binoculars in the crow's nest, left locked by a former crew member by accident, delayed spotting the iceberg. With no moon that night, only the ship's lights and stars were visible, and a mild sea fog further obscured visibility. The Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:30 p.m. Despite efforts to maneuver, the damage was severe. The iceberg tore open 5 compartments, and the ship began taking on water at a rate of 7 tons per second. As panic ensued, the ship's orchestra continued playing to keep spirits up. Hundreds leaked into the freezing -2 degrees Celsius waters, only to succumb to hypothermia. Titanic broke in two before sinking, trapping many passengers inside. In the chaos, Captain Smith's order of women and children first was misunderstood, with some lifeboats launched underfilled. Despite being one of the few male survivors, Bruce Ismay, Titanic's owner, managed to escape in a lifeboat. After the Titanic tragedy, many safety regulations were implemented, including requiring lifeboat capacity to match passenger numbers and prohibiting ships from cutting off wireless communications. An international iceberg patrol was also established. Today, the largest ships, like the Symphony of the Seas, dwarf the Titanic in size and technology, making comparisons almost irrelevant. Nonetheless, given the extraordinary sequence of events that led to the Titanic's sinking and the film's lasting impact, no other ship has left such a lasting impression on our collective memory, and perhaps that's a good thing. See you in the next video.